The book of Samuel has probably my new favorite wordplay in the entire Bible. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wordplay in the Word. This is your host, R.A. Sweeney, here to talk about different nuances in just like language and word choice and things like that in the Bible. Today, I wanted to talk about the way that sacrifice gets used to kind of tell the story in 1st and 2nd Samuel. So it's really kind of a super interesting story. I'm only going to dive into part of it and kind of in the middle because by the time we get to the story of Saul, we've already seen that there were issues with sacrifices with Eli's son. I mean, the story starts out with Hannah not wanting to go make sacrifices because she doesn't have a son and the other wife is being mean to her. So sacrifice has been really prevalent in the story up to this point, but I feel like this is where it gets pretty interesting. So we start out the story of Saul in 1 Samuel chapter 9, and he's going and looking for some donkeys that have run off, and the person that he's with says, "Hey, I heard that there's a seer over here or a prophet. We should go look for this person and maybe he can help us out." And Saul's, I think it's the first thing that Saul actually says. I should have looked into that. Now I'm trying to think. But I think it's the first thing we ever see Saul say is he's asking, like, well, what do we have to give? Like, we don't have an offering to present to the prophet if we're going to go ask him. But the friend ends up prevailing, and they go looking for the prophet in this town that they're by. And so they're asking around, trying to find him. And someone actually says, like, hey, you can go over here, and he might not be there right now, but you can expect him because he always blesses the food. And it says, the people will not get started eating until he has blessed it. So like they're waiting on his word in order to get started, which is going to come up in the story. Then he ends up finding Samuel. They share a meal. He gets anointed, and all of that has kind of hints of sacrifice language, whether it's the sharing the meal, the animals that are killed for the meal, the anointing, the pouring oil on Saul kind of matches some of the grain offerings. I'm not going to say any of those are hard and fast connections. I'm really kind of wrestling with, is this intentionally trying to get you thinking of sacrifices or not? So I'm just going to set all that aside just to say they're maybes, because I want to focus on the for sures. But there definitely is a lot of language that matches the sacrificial system in that whole part of the story. But then we jump ahead to chapter 11, and we see the Ammonites have invaded one of the towns, and Saul hears about it, and he is out in the field plowing with a pair of oxen. And when he hears about it, it says that he stops and he cuts up the oxen into pieces and he sends it throughout the whole land and says, hey, if anybody doesn't come, I'm going to cut up your oxen in the same way. So like, I'm going to kill all your livestock if you don't respond to my summons for war, which seems kind of intense for Saul. Maybe it was a good thing, maybe not. But it seems intense, but you've got this butchering of the animals, which, again, kind of some foreshadowing that we have there. Which then we jump ahead to chapter 13, and we see that Saul was waiting for Samuel to come. He's supposed to wait for 7 days, and it says by the appointed time, Samuel hasn't showed up, and the people are all getting scared of the Philistine army, and they're starting to desert him. He's afraid that everyone's going to desert him, and so there's all this fear going on, and so he makes a sacrifice out of fear, asking for God's protection out of fear, not out of, passion for God or, this is the right thing to do, Torah observe, like none of the right reasons. It's just, I'm scared of them, so I'm going to offer a sacrifice because that's what I'm supposed to do. And so he cuts up the sacrifice, just like what we see with the oxen to summon everybody at the previous battle that we see. So he cuts them up, and then Samuel shows up and he's like, what are you doing? Like, this was not right. And it actually, at that point, God starts to pull away the endorsement of Saul and his family as kings of Israel. Like, it's really starting to have consequences pretty quickly here of like, you made sacrifices out of fear rather than obeying the voice of God. Then we jump to the next chapter, and like half the chapter is about this battle's going on, that Jonathan had gone and started the battle by attacking the stronghold that no one could attack. And we see that Saul makes this vow saying, like, if anybody eats anything before I'm revenged on these people, they're going to be put to death. So I'm going to sacrifice the people who are eating. And again, eating, cutting up animals to eat, is at least mechanically kind of similar. So he makes that vow to sacrifice anybody who's disobedient to him. And then we find out that the people get really hungry and they start just like ripping animals apart and just eating this bloody raw meat. And Saul's like, stop. And he ends up building an altar and has people bringing the animals to him. Again, he's cutting up the animals and butchering them so that they can cook the meat at least. And they have this weird like barbecue in the middle of the battle so the people stop eating meat with the blood in it, which is against the Torah. And it says that's the first time he built an altar. Which, if we think back to Abraham, he was always building altars. Like, it seems like every like chapter or so, he went somewhere new and he built an altar there. Saul is not building altars. This is the first altar that he built. And he's cutting up the animals, which the word for offering a sacrifice that normally gets used means to chop up an animal. So he's building an altar, he's chopping up animals just like he did before, because his vow is now causing problems. It's this whole big deal. And then we find out that Jonathan had eaten during that time. Like, he'd eaten some honey. And then we see later on that all the people come together and Saul finds out that Jonathan had eaten, and now he's planning to sacrifice his son, which should remind us of Jephthah in the Judges. He had promised, I will sacrifice to you, God, whatever comes out of my door if you give me victory. He ended up sacrificing his own daughter, and it's this horrible picture of child sacrifice. And now Saul's planning to relive it until the people restrain him. And so there's this weird sacrifice dynamic going on there. So really, like, Saul is just making bad choices relating to sacrifices all over the place here. And then we get to the story where they fight against the Amalekites. And so in chapter 15, in verse 3, God is talking to Samuel so that Samuel can tell Saul, and he says that he wants the Amalekites to be devoted to destruction. So not just kill them all, like, they are a sacrifice in destroying the people, the animals, the camps. Like, everything here gets destroyed, and that's going to be a sacrifice to God, is what God says to Samuel, Samuel says to Saul. And then it says that Saul went and he fought the battle. And in verse 9 of chapter 15, it says that Saul and the people, they kept back all the best things. And it says that they devoted to destruction all the worthless things. So they're offering worthless things as sacrifices, keeping all the best stuff for themselves. And we're told there that Saul was intentionally keeping back the stuff. And then a few verses later, when Samuel shows up, he's like, hey, you were supposed to sacrifice everything. And Saul's like, oh yeah, we did sacrifice everything. And he's like, well, how come I hear a lot of livestock and stuff? And he's like, oh, well, we kept all the best stuff. We were going to sacrifice it. And you can just, like, at this point, it's like you were supposed to sacrifice everything and you didn't sacrifice all the stuff. And now you're saying you didn't sacrifice the stuff because you were going to sacrifice the stuff. And that's when we get the famous line from Samuel, where he says, has the Lord as great of delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as he does in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to listen than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of divination, and presumption is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king. And there's all that sacrifice, like, it's juxtaposing the ideas of sacrificing with obedience and with faithfulness and just doing what you're supposed to do, because the whole time it's like, you keep talking about doing sacrifices, but why are you even doing sacrifices when you won't even do them the right way? You're not willing to listen. You're doing wrong sacrifices. You're not sacrificing what I'm asking for. And it's like when somebody gives you a gift of something that you clearly don't want, like you've expressed you don't want it, they don't care, and they're just going to give you whatever they want to give you, and then they expect appreciation for it. And it's like, you knew I didn't want this. And that's what's been going on here. And so then one of the things that Saul didn't sacrifice, that he didn't devote to destruction there, was King Agag. And so it says after Samuel, rebukes Saul and there's all of that stuff going on, it says he went and chopped up King Agag. It doesn't say that he killed him or anything. It says that he chopped him up into pieces. Sacrifice language. So finally we see someone is making the sacrifice they're supposed to make. Agag was supposed to be offered as a sacrifice. Samuel comes because Saul has just been messing up the whole thing. And now he's going to give God the sacrifice that God had asked for from the beginning. Which brings me to what I think is the funniest and also most terrible part of the whole story. So in the very next chapter, Samuel has gone to Bethlehem to Jesse's house to anoint David as king. And so God is telling Samuel to go do that. And here in verse 2, and Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears it, he will kill me." And the Lord said, "Take a heifer with you and say, I've come to sacrifice to the Lord." Which I always took to mean like, oh, just pretend like you're going to make a sacrifice. Saul doesn't need to know that you're anointing a new king. Just use this to kind of distract from your real mission there. But after all of that sacrifice language, I don't think it's meant to be a misdirect. I think it's, God, how can I go and do this? Because Saul's going to find out, he's going to show up and he's going to kill me. And God's like, you know what Saul won't show up for is a sacrifice. So say there's going to be a sacrifice, Saul won't be anywhere near it because Saul is not good about sacrificing, which is really a huge burn on Saul. And so it's hilarious until you start to think like, oh my goodness, like Saul now has this reputation that if there's a sacrifice, he won't be there. If there's obedience to God, you won't find Saul around. And it's like, oh my goodness, what kind of a reputation? Like, what is my reputation when I'm disobedient? Like, am I the type of person that God looks at and is like, hey, if you want to make sure that R.A. Sweeney's not going to be around, make sure that you're doing this really good thing and he won't be a part of that. And it's really just terribly convicting and heartbreaking that all of this has come to the point where it's like, who won't be around if you're offering sacrifices? Saul. And that'll be your protection against him, is he's not coming near an appropriate sacrifice. So that's just terrible. Then, kind of like how I said at the beginning, like we've skipped over a lot of the sacrifice stuff with like Hannah and Eli's sons and things like that. You can go through the rest of the story and look at how sacrifice plays out. We've seen like the bad sacrificial picture of Saul, and that continues to develop with his story. But then we can look at David and how that changes the story a little bit, and really just look for sacrifice throughout the story of 1st and 2nd Kings is really interesting. But for now, that's at least the part where I wanted to really illustrate like how sacrifice is shaping this story, talking about, God's motives, Saul's character and different things like that. And I feel like that's going to illuminate how we read the rest of 1st and 2nd Samuel. So for now, I hope that's a blessing. Please subscribe if you like these videos so that you can see more of what we're doing. Share with other people who might appreciate some of the word nerdiness that we explore here. Click like or leave comments so that other people can find these videos so that we can maybe talk about some of the things going on in these. I'd love to connect with you guys in the comments. But please feel free to engage in any way so that we can help spread some more word about what is going on in the Bible. I hope this was a blessing. Thanks everyone for being here. We'll see you next time.